Okay. All right, everybody. Good afternoon. Thank you for spending a half an hour with us here today. This is Spy versus Spy, tips from the trenches for red and blue teams. So if that's not what you were hoping for, probably a good time to go. Go ahead. Just a quick synopsis about what we're going to be presenting today.
And it's
Not updating? Yeah, the shark's pretty sweet, right? Well, I'll go ahead and talk through this while Tom figures out the technical situation. But basically, we're going to go through defenses for several common but still very effective attacks. We're going to take a phased approach to them, so we're going to first talk about the attack at its most basic level and then what defense might look like for that, and we're going to kind of ramp up from there and kind of go back and forth a little bit and demonstrate that sort of cat and mouse nature that attacks have. We're good. All right, sweet. Nice job. Yep, let's go. So, a little bit about us. I'm Jeff, at Jamcut on various social medias. I'm an associate principal consultant at Secure States, and my primary area of focus is on the offensive side of security.
All right. And as you guys can see, my name is Thomas McBee. My Twitter handle is @Tafanis. I'm a senior analyst at Secure State and primarily responsible for defensive services.
Okay, so we're going to get right into it here. These are the three attacks that we're going to be using as examples today. So phishing, malicious devices, and various password attacks. So we're going to jump right in with phishing to start. This is something that everyone should be aware of and should be familiar with this attack. We're going to use social engineering specifically delivered through email. We have a variety of intended results, but usually credentials or shells, and it's often associated with terrible stock images like some of the ones that you see up here on this slide.
Okay. So some of the basic defenses that we like to put in place for phishing, of course, being like the number one standard, right? User awareness training. Try not to make sure when you're applying your user awareness training, make sure that you are using current examples, right? Too often do we see many of our examples that we do use referencing back to like Nigerian print scams, so on and so forth. So they're usually riddled with grammatic errors. Just make sure you're up in your game. Actively attempt to phish your employees with real-world current scenarios. So, again, here you go is a nice example of a scam that we've all seen and used it before in our user awareness trainings that do not really provide any kind of effectiveness for our users. Also, up your game. Actively phish again. Don't water this down for your C-stack. Don't water this down for anybody. You know, as an attacker, going to make it easy or make the fish to not to be too realistic. No, they're going to invoke emotions. They're going to use any way necessary that they can to get sensitive information out of you or proprietary information. So make sure you're doing the same thing. Actively phish your people.
Okay, so Tom's kind of talked about that basic level of defense for phishing and starting with training the users and making sure that they're aware, able to report an attack, spot an attack, that kind of stuff. So as a result, as an attacker, really to up our game, we have to send a better phish as well. So like Tom mentioned, the days of the Nigerian prints are long gone. They've been gone for quite some time. What we really have to do is some actual in-depth research on our targets, both social and technical research. Look for, technical triggers that are occurring at the organization that can lend legitimacy to your pretext and put some effort into that pretext, right? You have to take all these little bits of information and combine them together and to make something that's going to be actually good and actually enticing for your user. If you don't already follow John Lambert on Twitter, you should check that account out. He's a Microsoft employee, and he's constantly posting real interesting lures and other type of actual phishing attacks that people see in the wild. So those are good places to start for some interesting types of attacks. So these two images up here are just a couple of examples. You're not going to be able to take a template, really, and use it right out of the box and no matter what tool you use. But these are some templates that we provide with Kingfisher, which is a phishing tool that Secure State has developed and made available. And this is what we kind of mean by making them look a little bit more presentable, right? You want to actually apply some HTML, some CSS. You want to make these look like legitimate messages or legitimate websites if you're setting up a credential gathering page. So nothing super janky looking like we see a lot with other training solutions. In addition, you may want to consider using creative domains. So a lot of times one of the first things that you might try is just spoofing directly in from the domain that you're targeting. That doesn't work that often, but it's still worth giving a shot sometimes. If you find yourself not able to do that, up here we have .corn, which is actually not a valid TLD, but at first glance, when it shows up in Outlook, it looks very similar to .com. So if we were going to try to spoof into like BSidesCleveland.com, we might send it from BSidesCleveland.corn and get that to inbox, and the users might click it on first glance. These other two links here, no, it's fine. These other two links are a couple of different tools. There's screenshots up here now to demonstrate them. The first one is a website, expireddomains.net, which does what it sounds like it does. You can search out any different keyword or any different domain, and it'll show you domains that have recently expired that you can grab and then use to phish from. And the second one is a Python script that I wrote that's it's pretty simple, but it takes a list of domains as input that you might have found during reconnaissance, and it'll tell you when those domains are going to expire. And in the time frame that you're doing your assessment in, you may be able to grab one of those domains and use it during your assessment.
Okay, so now that the attack team is introducing better phishing techniques, we want to make sure that we're doing the same thing. We want to introduce some better technical controls that will help to alleviate some of these attacks. So things like sender policy framework, introducing DKIM, and applying transport rules to our Exchange servers. So anybody here familiar with sender policy framework? Yeah, a couple of you. It should be pretty popular by now, right? But unfortunately, many people don't. They don't apply it, or they still utilize the soft fail instead of going with an actual hard fail. So sender policy framework, for those that don't know, it allows you to designate who has the authority to send on behalf of your domain. So again, make sure when you're applying your sender policy framework, just suck it up. Don't worry about the testing piece. Activate that hard fail. Who's familiar with domain key identified mail? Couple of you? Okay, cool. So even better. So here's a nice little link from Wiki that goes into great depth and detail on DKIM, but basically it's your public and private key sessions for exchanging mail. So we allow, with DKIM, you are able to pick and choose which portions of your message, whether you want to make it maybe the message header, which is probably a good idea, to use for your encoding. That then gets hashed up. Your public key gets posted up into DNS records, and then as the mail on the receiving end, it then takes that public key to authorize or authenticate the sender. Also, using things like Exchange transport rules. It's very similar to Outlook rules, but you're going to do this at the Exchange level. So before it even gets to your user's inbox, and take advantage of things like Jeff was saying. Attackers are going to use top-level domains that don't exist, things like .corn. So why not block that out? Why not prevent that from even getting to your user's inbox in the first place? So use these. Definitely send them over to a black hole, and maybe even do some alerting to those attempts.
Okay. So now Tom's got his second layer of defense in. He's got his technical controls implemented. As he's putting in things like SPF and DKIM, that's definitely going to really put a damper on our ability to send and spoof from that domain. So we're certainly going to have to actually go and buy a domain, set up an SPF record of our own, and be able to send in, make sure everything's on the up and up in terms of the sending domain that we're doing. On top of that, some other kind of sneakier attacks that you might consider doing, send a meeting invite instead of a regular email message, right? A lot of times you get these and you just blanket accept them because you're busy and you'll deal with it later as it pops up on your calendar. So go ahead and send a meeting invite for a week or two out. And there's a link to an online presentation. Obviously, the user's going to have to log in with their company creds. And then you may, present them with a browser extension or some other file that you're sharing to enhance that online session that they're going to be participating in. If you're still trying to go the route of send a payload in as a attachment to the email, there's a couple things you can do to increase your chances here as well. So you can obfuscate that payload. Everyone's probably familiar with what that means, but you're just kind of breaking up the signatures and trying to get around the detection of that payload. In addition, you could even go the route of encrypting your payload using a key that you can determine on the outside, but also could be determined on the inside by your payload. So things like environment variables, if you can, use the Active Directory domain name or maybe a username for a specific user. As this payload begins to execute, it's going to pull that environment variable, decrypt, and then run your malicious commands, which will execute on the system that you're targeting. But if we get caught in like a sandbox or something like that, that's not going to have the same environment variables, and it's not going to execute properly and therefore not look malicious, increasing our chances.
Okay. So at this point, we kind of want to start basically wanted to shift the risk to somebody else. And start introducing things like third-party controls. Anybody that's using Office 365, you also have access, well, for a nominal fee, right? But for Microsoft's advanced threat protection. So this is it's just another ability for sandboxing for your messages as they come in. So suspicious content goes through a sandbox. Anything that might be as a malicious attachment gets put into a detonation chamber for analysis, and then any links that might be included in that message also are being analyzed offline. So, and it happens pretty fast, but in the event that the user themselves are clicking the link a little bit faster than the cloud service can analyze the link, they will get a notification that says, hey, this thing looks malicious, this thing looks funky or fishy. You might want to think twice before you proceed further. Also, this does open up in Azure for their analysis piece, so it's kind of handled off your sites. Mimecast also does very similar activities. It's very similar to Microsoft's solution, except for they also add in domain reputation and domain age verification. So if you just spun up a new domain to try to phish with, and you send somebody over to send a phish over to somebody that's using Mimecast, it will check the age of your domain registration to see how long have you been active. And if you haven't, they're going to send you right over to a black hole.
Okay, so one attack down, two more to go. Second one here we're going to talk about is malicious devices. This is also obviously a pretty common attack. Nowadays it's mainly USB devices. It used to be CDs and other stuff. It used to rely on auto run. Now for the most basic attack, we're looking at Microsoft Office files with malicious macros in them, maybe an executable payload in there as well. But ideally we're going to be sprinkling these around physically at the location. User's going to identify it, grab it, plug it in, and bad things are going to happen to them.
Damn those back things. Okay. So here you're going to want to apply a technical control, right? So we all kind of know that users want to use this type of media. So why not disable things like auto run? I'm pretty sure most modern operating systems this is already disabled for the most part, but macros are not. So I guess identify where are macros actually utilized or required for your business processes, and if they're not, disable them. There's really no good reason to have them enabled, especially from a generic end user standpoint. So plenty of links out there from Microsoft to apply these GPOs and where the settings are actually located.
Okay, so Tom's got our ability to use a executable payload. We can't do that anymore. Now we got to come with the bomb this time. So instead of using the executable payload, we're going to go with a hit attack. For those that aren't familiar, it's a human interface device, and basically what's going to happen here is that your USB is going to mimic a keyboard instead of a mass storage device, and it's going to, when it gets plugged in, it's going to execute a series of keyboard commands, the same as if you were sitting in front of the computer yourself typing on it. If you're familiar with a USB rubber ducky, this is the kind of the classic device that does this attack. There's a bunch of other options as well. The Bash Bunny is the kind of the new exciting one that's been out recently, but you have several different options for whatever your purpose is.
All right, so here you want to kind of fall back to your users. You want to make sure that they understand the risk that's involved when they pick up a device like this and try to plug it into your network. As you're applying your user awareness training, make sure you're tailoring this to the user themselves. If they really don't understand why it's important to them, if they don't really understand how it's going to affect their job or their role in the organization, they're really not going to take you seriously, guys. So definitely tailor that to them, make them understand the risk, and if they don't, beat them with a stick until they do. And then also you can do other technical controls like device installation through group policy objects. You can deny that. You could deny the installation using the GUID for the hid device itself. There's multiple classes. You can get really deep in the weeds with this, or you can really blanket install or deny the install, depending on the device type itself. So, a couple of links here for you guys to look at later on if you want. It's a really good defense for this type of attack.
Okay, so now what we have to do, since the users have been trained, is we have to take that same rubber ducky attack, right, and we have to sex it up a little bit. We can't just come with that same, generic rubber ducky or what have you, because the users have been trained to not plug in these strange or unknown USB devices. So we have to really entice them. We have to really make it hard to resist, right? So we have a couple of images on the next series of slides here. Go ahead and advance to the next slide, Tom.
Yeah, definitely Google sexy ducky.
Definitely Google that. So up here, we've got an image of a rubber ducky on the left. If you're not familiar with it, that's what it looks like. It's pretty nondescript, but it's also kind of generic looking as well. And you crack it open, and you can get access to the micro SD card on there. That's how you load your payload onto it. Go ahead. So this other thing up here is a demo kit from FlashBay, which is a company that makes branded USB devices in all different kinds of form factors. They've got like bracelets and lanyards and all kinds of crazy things. But what's nice about this is that they're super helpful, and if you call them up and ask politely, they'll send you this demo kit for free. The bad thing about it is that these devices they're dummy devices. There's no actual storage on any of these on any of these boards. But the good thing is that you can open these things up pretty easily and get to doing some modifications and some customization. So here what we've done is we've opened up one, and we're trying to put a rubber ducky in here. You can see in the first image it doesn't quite fit. It's not a problem. Just grab yourself a little strip of sandpaper and shave off like 1 millimeter on either side of that ducky PCB. It's okay. You can customize your own stuff. You're not going to hurt anything as long as you don't get too crazy and tear up the leads or whatever on the board. So here's the kind of the before and after shot. As you can see, we've added this to a keychain with a car key and some house keys as well to just kind of increase the legitimacy of this being something that somebody might have actually dropped, right? We're really trying to prey on the people's, their nature that's nice and they want to be helpful. So they're going to pick this keychain up and try to find the owner. They might plug it in and look to see if there's a picture or like a resume or something on there that they would recognize and figure out who actually lost their keys. So that's kind of the route that we're taking here now.
Okay, so what can we do to stop a ducky attack? You can start looking at things like standardized hardware. Anybody here currently standardize their hardware for their organizations? One. No, you don't, you liar. All right, so this is something that's actually quite difficult for most organizations. Either A, you're a smaller organization, which means you're more agile, you can actually do these kinds of things. Fortunately, you probably don't have the budget, right? How many times have we gone on and we had to buy different systems and kind of mix mash to get everything up and running? Or you're on the other side of the scale. You're a larger organization, you have the budget, you have the resources, but unfortunately you have like how many nodes on the network? How many different places in do you actually have to apply these standardized devices? So this is going to help limit down what's available, what can be plugged in, what can be recognized as a HIDS device. But again, depending on your available and your resources, it might be too much of a defensive measure for the risk that's involved. Okay.
So I also want to add to this that there's a little bit of research that's been done. I couldn't find a lot of like publicly available knowledge on this, but there's some research that indicates that it might be possible to actually spoof the device ID or reflash that with a valid device ID. Like I mentioned, there's not a whole lot of public research on it at this time. Additionally to that, it's also not very practical, right? Because if you know the device ID that's going to be valid in the environment, we're assuming that you also have some other insider knowledge that you might be able to do a different attack with. So I did just want to point that out, that even if you go this level with this technical control, there still may be some actual technical workarounds that could be implemented as well. So on to the final attack here. Now we're going to be talking about passwords. When I first started in information security doing pen tests, one of my mentors told me that nothing opens up a lock like its legitimate key, which I know is very cliche, but it's certainly very true as well. And that's why pen testers target passwords, attackers target passwords as well. So in an Active Directory environment, that password is the key that opens very many locks, depending on what types of systems authenticate back to Active Directory. For us, there are multiple ways that passwords might be compromised, but for this presentation, we're going to be specifically talking about password guessing or password spraying, as it's sometimes referred now. So things like Summer 17, that'd be one of the first things that I would try if I was doing a pen test in an organization. Based on the most common password policies, I'd be willing to bet pretty good money that some user is using Summer 17 in your organization.
Okay. So basic defense for passwords, of course, password policy requirements. NIST has their current draft in place, and they're stating that you must at least contain 8 characters with complexity. But at this point, really, 8 characters, guys. We all know the hardware is available to kind of crack this pretty quickly. So let's start introducing things like passphrases. As you can see here, I'm a BSides fanboy with parentheses and exclamation points. It's a pretty complex password. It's 25 characters long, and it's pretty easy to remember. Most systems are going to accept this, even out on the internet somewhere, for web authentication forms. And if they don't, it's probably because they're trying to limit SQL injection, which, well, you should do a different way of doing that. But anyway, it's pretty easy to remember. Definitely not a hard thing to implement, and definitely try to complement your technical controls with your user awareness training.
Oh, don't advance yet. So, like Tom said, Microsoft default is still 8 characters. Most recommendations, most standards are recommending 8 characters. Like Tom mentioned, that's not enough. We all know that's not enough. But at the same time, the guy that's got the 25-character passphrase with complexity, he's probably an overachiever. So that's not entirely realistic in most cases as well either. So as an organization, when you're looking to do this, you're probably going to try to take some baby steps first. So, Tom, you want to go to the next slide? What do you think would be like an appropriate number?
Well, increase to 10.
10? Okay. Well, in that case, I'm going to guess summer 2017, right, instead of summer 17. So what's your next step?
Increase it more. Let's go to 12.
Okay, so we go to 12. Now I guess company name 1. Obviously, that depends on your company name being company name, but you see what I'm trying to express here is that there's going to be guessable passwords despite the length. You want to try again?
Yeah, one more time.
Okay.
Yeah.
We're done.
14.
Okay. All right, sure. Let's go by 2 every time. Okay. Company name 17, throw a bang in there at the end, right? So what we're trying to illustrate here is that we can go through iterations of this over and over again, and we see companies doing this where, we have clients that we work with year to year, they increase their password policy, we come back the next year and we guess a different password, and they can't believe it, but this is just the nature of it. Because of the password policies, users are always going to pick passwords that are going to be guessable that still fit within those parameters. So best case scenario, you have something like company name 17 bang. Worst case scenario, you have, a service account called warehouse that still has a password of warehouse because it never expires, and when you update the policy, it never gets that new policy. So we have that as well. Ultimately, the defender's going to come to a certain realization.
Yeah, I realize my mistakes. Thank you. Okay. All right, so basically, what are some good defenses for password attacks, right? We want to start looking at things like multi-factor authentication. Where can we actually deploy multi-factor or two-factor authentication, and how can we incorporate this into our organizations?
Okay, and so in the interest of time, I'm going to go a little bit faster on this slide, but basically if we have multi-factor in the environment, we're going to look to probably go to a place where multi-factor is not currently implemented, right? It's costly to put everywhere, so we just have to find the place that they didn't put it. VPN's probably out. If you've got multi-factor, that's probably the first place it's going to go, so look for other opportunities to use the creds that you may have captured. Additionally, you might be able to circumvent that multi-factor through social engineering. You might phish the user for their two-factor code. You might call into the help desk and pretend to be a user and have the help desk disable two-factor for you temporarily. You have a number of options here as well. So that's really it for the attacks. Let's go ahead and check this out. So we've got our 3 attacks and we've got our defenses laid out here in this grid from good to better to best. And when we do that, we can start to see some different trends. So first one, pretty easy to see, right? We've got user awareness training in each of these different attacks at varying levels. Why is that? Because users have access to data, right? And we need to make sure that the users are trained to not give up that access to data. So it's important that we train the users. Why does it fail? Because users are human, and they get hungry, they get tired, they get emotional, whatever it is, but they're going to make a mistake at some point in time. So that's why it fails. On the other hand, the other ones that don't fall into that user awareness training all fall into a technical control. So these are important because, again, systems have access to data, and we need to put controls in place to make sure that that data doesn't get leaked out. And it fails because, as we've demonstrated, there's almost always a workaround for any given control in the environment. So keep these things in mind for a minute, and let's take one little quick step back. Go ahead. Let's talk about the NIST CSF. People familiar with that? A couple people, see some heads nodding. Okay. So I'm not going to get into too great a detail in any of these things, but it's a framework for managing cybersecurity risk provided by NIST. It's got these 5 phases here, and when you look at those phases, it's pretty easy to see that they kind of group into 2 separate groups. So phases 1 and 2 would be proactive, and 3 through 5 would be reactive. Let's go ahead. Let's take a look at phase 2 a little bit more in depth. We're talking here about protection, which is the ability to limit or contain the impact of a potential cybersecurity event. There's a lot of different, outcomes that you can have when you implement this phase, but they're all going to be obviously protective in nature. So if we go back to our defenses here, what we find is that these are all protective. Obviously, that's maybe not entirely hard to see, but sometimes the visual aid helps. The reason that is because we're putting all these things in place to keep the attacker out, right? Don't get to our data. We're going to train our users so you can't get to it. Don't break into our system. We're going to patch it. We're going to configure it so you can't get into it. These are all proactive steps that you can take. The problem is that we see organizations put a lot of their eggs or all of their eggs into the protective basket, and what happens when you do that, when that basket breaks, all your eggs fall out or get stolen or whatever, but they're gone. So, go ahead. What we're trying to hope is that people start to look at more as that detect phase, and that we've heard, for the past, year or so, we've heard people talking about that assume breach mentality in terms of defensive posture. So looking at a phase like this where we're identifying the occurrence of a cybersecurity incident, right? We want to use timely discovery to get to it quickly so we can remediate it quickly. This is where things like logging and alerting, SIMs come into place. These are all detection-based defenses, controls. Thank you. Tom, you have anything to add to that?
Sure. In addition to some of those techniques, you also look at things like honeypots. Anytime you can saturate your network with something else that could be a detection mechanism, it's going to provide you that first layer of notification. So a lot of these other controls are very great, but start introducing honeypots into your network. Start saturating things, making it look very legitimate. And I know they kind of had a bad rap a long time ago. People weren't properly configuring them. And it would introduce a potential breach point into the environments. But if you do take the time to configure them correctly, make sure you don't do SMB and then bind on the same box. They are going to do very, very good things for you. They're going to look very enticing, and it's a great way to alert to different activity going on in your environment.
All right. Well, that's it for our presentation. We thank you for your time. There's a couple of resources up here as links. We're going to go ahead and publish these slides so you can get access to these links. We had a lot of links in here. We also want to take just a quick second to thank the BSides Cleveland organizers for putting this event on for us, as well as Emily Gundry back there for the fantastic slides that you guys got to see. Thank you. Any questions?
I got a question.
Yeah, sure. So the question was, where else do we recommend deploying dual-factor authentication? So we're not just talking about a VPN. For me, I like to see it on, webmail. It's pretty rare that we see that on like OWA, for instance. So that's still a huge target for us. We can use those creds and log right in. Any other services that you have exposed as well. So if we don't typically recommend it, but if there's some business justification to have like RDP exposed to the internet for some system, we'd probably want you to use a dual factor solution there as well. Anything else?
Sure. Also, any management networks that you use for your administrative tasks. A lot of times you can start introducing like certificate-based authentication, right, on those systems. So keep those segmented off from the rest of the different networks, and then require the two-factor authentication to kind of get in there, and then introduce your Bastion boxes that way. And then from there, do your administration out. You could either do, like I said before, certificate-based or even some kind of tokenized or RSA, Duo, any of those, really. Is that good? Okay, cool. Any other questions? No? Awesome. Oh, wait. Okay. So what is the opinions on password generation and things? Sure. Password generation is great. I mean, especially if you have a vault to keep it in. As long as you have that master password. Things with though that would take care and consideration on that is don't leave it unlocked. So often we see those password vaults kind of hanging out there. We have one master password to get into all our different passwords. A lot of those have functionalities to auto-lock those upon either idle timeout or minimizing. So definitely take the extra steps to help secure that. But yeah, they're definitely